of Academic Affairs, 11/21/1994, in her office, the 9th floor, being conducted by Carol Pohl, sociology teacher. Okay. If you would tell me your present position, and if you would trace back your history at FIT.
All right, my present position is Vice President of Academic Affairs, and I started working at FIT 24 years ago in September of 1970 as an instructor in economics in the social science department. I served as assistant professor, chairperson of the social science department. I served as associate chairperson, probably, chairperson of the faculty association, and chairperson of the curriculum committee. And then at one point I was asked to work on the development of the new upper division program with an marketing option in international trade. So that's how I started the progression. One of the things that I might mention is that one of the most exciting times at FIT for me was when I chaired the college-wide curriculum committee at the time that the new upper division programs were being put through, which was extremely interesting as the design and implementation of the upper division was being put through. To go in sequential order, I worked for about 10 years as a consultant in economics after I finished my doctorate and while I was teaching here at FIT. A lot of that was international consulting, and more or less ended when I was asked to take time to put together the international trade option for FIT, which became a full-time job. And so that was the next time that I really was doing something very creative, for me, I felt, very creative and innovative at the college in developing the option for international trade in the bachelor's program for marketing. That program was approved and initiated, and I became the coordinator of the program. And it was in that guise that I was lent to the Business and Technology Division for part of my time from the Social Science Department. And that's how I became involved in so much more of what was happening in the upper division, in the marketing bachelor's programs in Business and Technology, which ultimately led to my being asked to serve as the acting dean of Business and Technology, which I did for 2 years. From 89 to 91. In June of 1990, I was asked by President Feldman to serve as the acting vice president for academic affairs, so that for the year 1991 I was wearing both hats, and served as acting vice president for academic affairs from 90 to 92, and then in June of 92 was appointed VP of Academic Affairs. So that's the whole history from starting out in 1970 to 1994.
Could we talk a little about how you remember the college in 1970, what it was like then, the students, the faculty, the mission?
Well, I think the mission was very much as it is today, except within a 2-year context. It was focused on meeting the needs of the industries that we represent, while at the same time providing students with a general education that would allow them the flexibility to start careers rather than just initial jobs within a 2-year context, within an AAS. It was a much smaller school, less than half the size that it is today in terms of student body. And in many ways, because it was much smaller, and because when I first arrived, everything was in the C building. That was the only building on campus, and the dorm across the street. Those were Nagler Hall. Those were the only two buildings. So everything was very compact, and because it was very small, or at least much smaller than it is today, and because it was very compact, I think people knew each other more within divisions, but also between divisions, because we weren't as separated as we are now. People weren't spread out in so many different buildings. Now, of course, we didn't have all the wonderful things we have today in the way of resources, but a nice part of it was that people really knew each other. It would be very hard to have been a full-time member of the faculty and not gotten to know virtually everyone else who was a full-time member of the faculty, because there just wasn't that much space. The first classes I taught at FIT, 4 sections as the usual program would be. One was up in the living room on the 9th floor without a blackboard. Now, for an economist, this is torture. And they did, by the second week, find a rolling blackboard that they could roll in, so at least I could write something. The students were sitting on the floor, on the carpet, because there were no chairs. But they did get me a rolling blackboard the second week. 2 classes were regular classrooms. It looked just as you would more or less expect a classroom to look. And the 4th was a room full of sewing machines. And that was how it started. So I think there was an intimacy. And I think some of the people who've been here a long time, probably yourself included, kind of miss that, because we remember the days when there was much more of an interrelationship, because it was smaller. However, on the positive side, of course, while we've gotten much larger today, we have the upper division programs, which allow us to much better prepare the students for the future. They are being given a much broader education, and I think that's extremely important. I think the quality of what can be offered and the quality of the resources has expanded dramatically, and that's the positive side. There's never enough. There's never enough space. There's never enough resources. There's never enough money. But given that, I believe we have come a long way in being able to provide a much more sophisticated program to the students today, and through the upper divisions, the opportunity to provide them with broader education for their own futures and a great deal more flexibility.
What was the thinking about providing the upper division?
When I was first hired, Dean Gladys Marcus was in charge of the liberal arts, and she told me that they wanted a full-time economist because they were planning on having an upper division, and there would be BS programs in some kind of business, as it turned out, marketing and production management, and that they would need economics. And so after I had been here a year or two and started hearing more talk about this and talking more with administrators about what the plans were, I realized that much of it was, in fact, coming from industry. There was a very real feeling that the industry needed people that had more than just a 2-year education, but who did have specialized knowledge. And the desire to provide for that combination of the very specific FIT skills and industry knowledge, but with a broader context, seemed to be a strongly motivating factor in doing the work that was necessary to add the upper division. Also, in President Feldman's mind, the idea that we would remain an upside-down curriculum, which, as you know, we have right up until 1994. The first 2 years being very much the details and specific knowledge of a major that in a traditional 4-year college you would probably specialize in your second 2 years. The idea being that this was a kind of entitlement. I'm trying to remember Marvin's words because I heard him say it so often, but that it enabled the students to have some skills that they could go out and use in the marketplace. And that for many of our students then, even as now, we have a significant portion of our student body who are first-generation college students. And sometimes, depending on the ebb and flow of immigration into the United States, often waves of first-generation Americans coming into the country and going to college and learning skills, and part of it really requires that they be trained to go out and start those first jobs. And yet at the same time, we wanted to be educating them for careers in an industry where there would be many changes over the years, and they would need problem-solving skills and communication skills and language skills to be able to have the flexibility to satisfy their own careers as well as to meet the growing sophistication of the industry or the industries that FIT represents. So I really believe it did have a kind of a dual focus on the industry feeling the need and the college feeling that the students should be given that opportunity.
And the programs that were introduced at the time, the sequence of the programs?
Well, there were production management programs in apparel and in textiles. There was a marketing program, and there were a series of programs in the art and design division in fashion and in applied arts areas. At one point, there was a division within the fine art, in the art and design area, to include the upper division in both fashion design and in other design-related areas, such as interior design, advertising design, textile surface design, and then specific programs that grew out of those, such as packaging and specialized programs that come within the major areas. So that, in fact, the development in particularly the art and design division has not been as specific as it might have appeared. Permission was given for several programs for BFAs, and then within those broad programs, new offshoots have been developed. The toy program was developed. That came later. And I guess the restoration program was added on. I'm trying to think the ones that came later on. But certainly toy and restoration were programs that were added later in the history of the upper division. I believe also in the textile surface design, fabric styling was added as an additional upper division program after the initial ones. Now, I could be wrong about that because I didn't go back and check the dates, but I have a feeling fabric styling was also one of the add-ons. For a very brief time, there was a variation on a fine arts upper division. That did not last very long. I think it was a program that had a problem establishing its identity, because what we had been given permission to set up were programs that were in design and applied arts. And so I think trying to package a fine arts program within the broader rubric of the applied arts was perhaps not a happy combination. So that eventually there was a curriculum that was finally approved. It ran for a few years and then it was withdrawn.
When you say approved, it was approved by which governing bodies?
State University of New York and New York State Department of Education. We cannot run any degree programs here without approval of both SUNY Central in Albany and the State Department of Education. Both of them must approve any courses, any curriculum that we run for for a degree.
And what about the Board of Trustees and the role that they played in this development?
Our Board of Trustees must approve any curriculum that we are interested in providing. In the process of getting permission from SUNY Central to actually register a new program, part of the process, of course, requires the endorsement of our own Board of Trustees.
And what is the relationship to the foundation? Does the foundation play a role in this, the Educational Foundation?
The Educational Foundation is principally a fundraising group. Their principal role is to raise funds for the college, specifically for scholarships. And also they make an annual contribution for one of the dormitories, and they provide for other funding for the college. But they're principally a fundraising group. They do, of course, provide us with industry expertise to whom we can go when we are setting up industry advisory boards. Every major at FIT has an industry advisory board. And often when you are setting up an industry advisory board, you start with, well, who's on the Educational Foundation that we could recruit to this particular industry advisory board.
Now, the industry advisory board has been the structure of FIT from its beginning, or was that something that evolved?
Well, as long as I have been at FIT, and I only arrived in 1970, but when I first began to look into programs that were majors at FIT, which I think was my second year here, I was asked to look into the Advertising Communications program and discovered, much to my surprise, that the Advertising Communications and Advertising Design not only were separate departments, but they came out of separate divisions and didn't speak to each other very often. And that's when I began to learn about the structure of those things. Industry advisory boards certainly existed. So where they started, I can't really tell you. We'd have to get Loretta Keene to do a history for us. But they certainly have been in existence since the 70s. And while occasionally an industry advisory board kind of fades out and has to be revitalized, they are very much an important part of our program. We haven't had, but are going to have, an advisory board for liberal arts for the division. But within the majors, each major has had its own advisory board. And while at times they've been dormant, they are revitalized from time to time. Graduate division is setting up brand new advisory boards this fall. The fine arts department set up a new advisory board, I guess about a year and a half or 2 years ago now. We have been going around, we've had each of the deans looking through their programs and revitalizing the advisory boards wherever possible. I can tell you that when I was asked to put together the international trade auction, I needed an industry advisory board and went to Shirley Guttman, who was, of course, then the executive director of the Educational Foundation. She gave me a list of the members, and I, with their corporate identities and business identities, and I went off and went over it and then went back and met with her and reviewed some ideas that I had, and then met with Janice Weinman, who was then the Vice President for Academic Affairs. And from that combination of meetings, based upon the membership of the Educational Foundation, set up the first advisory board for the international trade program, and that has evolved, and now I think they have quite a brand new board that's been set up within the last year. So the boards evolve over time. The industry groups that for each department are extremely important because it keeps the curriculum relevant, in close touch with the industry. And I think a good industry advisory board is essential to every major. I'm delighted that Lois Ambash is now preparing one for the liberal arts division.
Could you talk a little about the advisory board that you helped set up on the international trade, and a little about the international trade program?
Well, the advisory board that I set up had representation from both the production and retail end of the business, and people who were both exporting and importing. So I tried to have it cover a good deal of the industry's participation in international trade at that time. The program itself was designed as a result of a major grant that the college had received that allowed us, from the federal government, that allowed us the opportunity to set up two sets of programs that were international in scope. One was a degree program, which turned out to be the marketing option in international trade, which is a Bachelor of Science program. The other was to set up an export advisory service, which Elaine Stone did out of the Small Business Center. And that initiated some wonderful activities that have gone forward to her actually winning the E Award, which is a very high honor from the Commerce Department for promotion of exports. The international program that I developed ended up being a 4-semester program with a core of marketing courses from the core courses then being offered by the college in marketing, to which I added a series of specialized courses in both the liberal arts area and the business and technology area, so that there were specialized courses in cross-cultural studies in the social science department. There was a political and economic geography course and an international economics course. In the business and technology division, we added an update of the importing course and an export management course and an international marketing course. So we added, basically what we ended up with was a list of 6 courses required in the major, 3 from liberal arts and 3 from business and technology, that focused specifically on international aspects. We also required some type of language or area studies, a 2-semester language requirement, which also provided for some area studies as an alternative, has now been formalized as a 2-semester foreign language requirement.
Could you explain area studies?
These are courses that are offered one is offered in Western Europe, one is offered in Latin America, one is offered in China and Japan, and the Asian area. They were designed to give students more in-depth knowledge of the regions of the world. And at the beginning, when some students were very reluctant to get involved in a foreign language, we would occasionally allow a student to take an area study course and a matching art history course. For instance, the art history, the Asian course on art history, and Professor Booty's China and Japan course, which was an area studies course, would be a pair that would be allowed as an alternative until we were able to formalize the 2-semester language requirement, which we have since done. But we certainly have other programs that still use that option. The idea of encouraging students to study about other parts of the world, and of course an excellent way to do that is to study a language, but in some programs, either when they're new or when there's some reluctance on the part of the faculty to commit to the foreign language requirement, we have used a combination of area studies and global studies of various sorts as an alternative.
Who are the students? They're primarily FIT students who started here?
Yes, the upper division programs at FIT are predominantly people who have graduated from our own AAS program, going on in either art and design for the BFA or in business and technology for the BS. However, we do take transfer students, and we do have articulation agreements with other 2-year colleges so that students will know ahead of time what they can transfer in and what they will need to do. And we have a number of students every year who do transfer into the upper division if they meet the requirements. The majority of these students going on to the upper division are our own graduates.
And what about international students themselves? I mean, students from other countries who come here?
Well, as you know, we have 500 and some this year. I'm sure you've seen those statistics. And the international students that come to study at FIT come from truly all over the world. It's a remarkable group of students because they come to study so many different things. In our graduate program, we have a significant number of foreign students in the art and design areas and in business and technology. So that across the board, we have attracted students from around the world. And in fact, it's interesting for those of us, as you have, Carol, who've been here over the years, to see the changes in where the student body comes from. At one time, we had a lot of students coming in from the Middle East. At another time, a lot of students coming in from South America. I remember one year when we had, or not one year, but several years, when we had a significant number of students coming down from Canada who had discovered FIT and whose families, in many cases, were in the apparel industry and were being sent down. When we first had our upper division, a lot of young people from Canada coming down. Of course, we have a large number of Asians coming in from Japan, from Korea, from Hong Kong, from Taiwan, from one or two from China itself over the years, Thailand, the Philippines, etc.
And they're mostly the students who were immigrants in the United States. Would you say that's true, or?
Students who, the 500 and some that I'm speaking of as international students are not immigrants. They're here on student visas. We definitely have, I think I mentioned it earlier, the phenomenon of being a school where we do get newly arrived, the children or young people, I take that back, but the young adults who are relatively new immigrants. They may, in fact, be the children of immigrants themselves, or they may have come when they were in high school. I've had any number of students who came to the United States with their parents when they were in high school and then finish high school and come on to FIT. I believe that this happens because the fashion industries serve as an entry occupation for many groups of immigrants. And so as their families settle in this country, the school attracts young people who will be studying in those fields where they will be able to get jobs and go to work. So, for example, we had a large number of Russian immigrants into the United States back in the 1970s. And there was a large wave of Russians in the late 70s, early 80s coming into FIT. We had a large wave of Iranians coming in the late 60s and early 70s. We've had a wave of students from Central America whose parents had come to live in the United States. We've had large numbers of students at different times from India whose families had come to this country. And of course, now we have, once again, students coming in from Russia and what we used to call East European, but I think we're now back to calling them Central European countries, and from Asia, of course. So as you see the trends in immigration to the United States, it doesn't take long for it to show up at FIT. It really is remarkable.
Could you describe the international students that are here, those 500, a little bit, how they're similar or different from FIT students, have you noticed? There are some very interesting similarities and some very interesting differences. By and large, the international students are well prepared. The only area in which there is sometimes a lack of preparation may be in areas such as English communication skills, where the difference between studying a language abroad and using it in a college environment is a problem. And in some cases, some students have come in with some problems in that area. Generally, the international students seem to arrive very well prepared. The difference, I would say, that I notice the most in my own classes between the students who are here from abroad and many of our own students is a tremendous work ethic, a tremendous drive to get everything they possibly can while they're here. And I think that's very understandable. They have come often a very long way from home at considerable expense to themselves and their families. They're here for a very specific purpose, and they are really hardworking, very dedicated students who want to take advantage of everything they can possibly do in this period of time that they have. And I think that's an understandable difference with the American students, the students from the United States, who perhaps have a more laid-back, casual, relaxed attitude, a little less strongly driven than so many of the students from abroad. That, I think, is one of the distinctions that a lot of the faculty have noted, that there is a difference.
Have you noticed that there are many of them are from the families in the apparel industry and fashion?
This is just impressionistic. This is not based on statistics. My impression from speaking to my own students, and I continue to teach one class every semester in continuing ed, international trade as a matter of fact, from my own students over the years and from the many students that I see and meet on for various reasons in my administrative capacity, many of the foreign students do come from families that have an industry in either the textile industry or an interest in either the textile industry or the apparel industry, either in production or retail, some aspect of the industry. And that's understandable because they're looking for a place to get a professional education for their own families, and so they send them as students to FIT. But that's not always the case. I mean, we also get international students from every possible kind of family who come here attracted by either the business and technology end of the business or from the art and design area because they're interested in some form of design or applied arts. But many, yes. Unscientific sampling of random individuals.
Have you noticed any changes in terms of the students, speaking sociologically, in terms of from 1970 gender, ethnicity, anything like that?
Well, despite our very best efforts, we are still very predominantly female. I think there's a little more mix in the student body than there was when I first arrived. Certainly in my classes there is, but then I'm not teaching a typical class. I'm teaching an upper division marketing course. So perhaps that biases my view. We are still 85% female. I just see somewhat more male students in some of the classes. I think there has been a change in terms of the overall percentage of students who are of some type of minority. In other words, I believe that if you added together the African American, the Hispanic American, the Asian Americans, the Native Americans, although we don't have very many in that category, that if you think of all of the specific minorities that we represent, I think that pool is much larger in total than it was when I first arrived. I think more of our students, however, seem to come from families where there has been some post-secondary education, at least among the students that I have now. Many of them seem to come from families where going on to college of some type, they're not the first member of their family to do it, although we do still serve, as I mentioned earlier, in that capacity as a school that provides the first college experience for many families. But my suspicion is that perhaps is not as high a ratio as it was earlier, although without a real study it's not easy to know. We do seem to have more, all right, trying to think how to correctly say this. The amount of time our students have to spend working out of college, outside of school, has expanded enormously. Students used to work their academic schedules around perhaps working 12 or 15 hours a week. Now it is not at all uncommon to have a student tell you they have to work 25 hours a week. I think for many of our students who are trying to do a very demanding credit load, the amount of time they have to spend working to provide support financially is an increasing burden. And I think that's a very real change. So that while we always had some who would say, I have to rearrange my schedule to take into account my working hours, many more students took their college program and then fit their work hours around it because they were working a reasonable number of hours. But now, I think for many of them, these are full-time day students who tell you they're working 20 and 25 hours a week. And I think that is a subject of both probably sociology and economics. It's both the social demographics and also the economics of the situation that has changed. I don't think our students are being as well prepared in high school as they were. I'm convinced that students are not being as well prepared in K through 12, and that we need to focus a lot of our efforts on that. I think that the preparation of the students coming in and the enormous need we have for educational skills, we're trying to increase the amount of math skills that are offered to the students, and we've expanded the educational skills in the English area, is a result of the fact that for many of these students, they were in school from K through 12, and they simply did not end up getting the level of education that prepared them to go immediately into college level work.
I'd like to touch upon some other issues as well. We've discussed it somewhat, but I'd like to add some more about the role of industry in shaping the FIT, the structure of the classes. If you'd like to add anything more about that? And if you've seen a change over time?
Well, I think one of the things we've seen is that FIT serves a wider variety of industries now. That originally we were looking at the apparel, manufacturing, and retail industry and the textile industry. But we've really gone much further than that now to look at a wide variety of industries that we call the fashion industries. So I think the definition has expanded, and we're trying to serve a much wider variety of activities than we were initially. I think the industry itself in some areas has been extremely helpful, where industries have been willing to really be major participants, where they have raised funds and have very significantly contributed to the development of programs. And I think that's extremely important. I think that, as all professional schools must do, we do have to be careful in drawing the line between education and technical training. That we are a college, and we are an accredited college giving degrees that are recognized by and registered with SUNY Central and the State Department of Education. We are not just running training programs. And I think that's an important thing, important distinction, and sometimes means that there are ideas that industry has that we have to be creative in incorporating into our curriculum, that we can't just respond to today's needs for industry. We have to also look at the broader needs of our students. And I think that has to always be number one, in preparing the students first and then matching them as best we can for the preparation for careers in the industry.
How would we avoided just becoming a technical school?
Well, I give a lot of the credit to Gladys Marcus, because she was the Dean of Liberal Arts for many, many years, who firmly held the line anytime there was a major contretemps about the role of liberal arts at FIT. She was the one who was for many, many years in the forefront of insisting that we wanted to have the higher standards of providing for independent liberal arts that would service the needs of our students in a broader intellectual sense. She also participated in the decision-making that led us to have a BS, which is the upper division degree for business and technology, is 50% liberal arts, 50% major related courses. And that was very much something that she urged the college to do. They could have settled for a degree that would have required a smaller percentage of liberal arts, of 1/3 to 2/3, 1/3 liberal arts, 2/3 business. And she convinced Marvin Feldman and others that it was very important to provide the broader liberal arts education for students in preparation for the future. And at that time, we were all being told you would have 3 careers in your lifetime, and now the people in placement tell us it's something like 5. And it's really necessary for people to concentrate on communication skills and problem-solving skills and areas of that sort, which are very much the product of a liberal education.
What are some of the programs that industry started? You mentioned that industry was instrumental.
Well, there are 2, one in each of the major divisions that immediately jump to mind. The cosmetics, fragrances, and toiletries industry has been remarkably supportive of the program, which is now an option under the marketing program in the Business and Technology Division in cosmetics, fragrances, and toiletries. And the Industry Advisory Board for that program, led by Annette Green now, has just been remarkable in their support, both moral support and intellectual support and financial support. We now have the Annette Green Fragrance Laboratory as a result of the contributions that the board made. They have been absolutely remarkable in every step of the way, most supportive and helpful in student scholarships and program development, and providing us with the expertise that was necessary to develop that program. And that's, to my way of thinking, a prototype of how to do it. Their mentoring program that they established several years back now, in which the Industry Advisory Board helps to provide mentors for every student in their junior year, and then internships for them in their senior year. Just been terrific. And in the art and design area, I guess the one that I would have to pick as the shining example is the toy program, where the toy industry, through their 2 major toy industry associations, have been very, very supportive of the development of the program at FIT, raised the money to set up the laboratories that were necessary for the program to begin, provide industry expertise, a very active advisory board, help in arrangements for the internships, and just in every way have been the same kind of moral support, intellectual support, and financial support that just is a wonderful combination. And at the same time, in both programs, have understood that, and these are both upper division programs, the one a BS, the other a BFA, have understood that there is an academic side, and that we have to make a marriage of the academic needs of the programs and the professional needs. And I think both are truly exemplary in how those can work out positively.
Could you discuss also the role of unions, both within the college union and the outside unions that the college has been affiliated with, and how it's shaped FIT, if at all?
Well, let's do the outside first. The FLCIO, of course, is a Lady ILGWU is a part of the AFL-CIO. I didn't get that very well. The ILGW has been very supportive in the establishment of FIT all the way back to 1944, I believe. I think it's from the very beginning that the union, or an amalgam of unions, were supportive of the college from the very start. And they have been very supportive. We have had a member of organized labor in the industry on our board of trustees for as long as I know, and I would imagine that a historian could check that and say that there has always been a representative. I'd be very surprised if there hadn't. And the union has, the broader outside unions, in other words, have been very supportive of the college, have been very supportive of helping to develop special programs at the college, and the college has been very supportive of them. We have special workshops and non-degree, non-credit programs that we help run for different groups within the union when they need certain programs. So it's been a very supportive relationship, and I think that's been very positive. Within FIT, of course, we have the UCE, and that's a unique institution, and that's a word I once banned from the Business and Technology Division, so for me to use it is a lot. It truly is most unusual because it is one union in which you have the membership of employees, both full-time faculty, part-time faculty, and staff. And I understand from what I have heard that that's quite a combination, not at all the ordinary. And that the union, starting in, when I arrived, the union as I've known it, starting with 1970, has been a very energetic, very active group that has been very involved in FIT in terms of what you would perhaps think of as the more traditional roles of a union, but also I think very much also in the academic governance of the college, which is also very unusual because in most institutions that role is played more by the faculty association. I think at FIT it's been a combination, the faculty association on the one hand, but the union also taking a more active role in some academic governance than you might normally expect a union to do. I think they've been a very profound influence on the institution, on what the institution could do, and sometimes what the institution couldn't do.
Could you discuss the linkages to other SUNY colleges?
Well, FIT is funded and recognized as a community college within the State University of New York, and this puts us in a particular niche. State University of New York has state-operated campuses and the community colleges. We are a community college as far as the State University of New York is concerned. We are funded that way, and we fall under the governance requirements of the community colleges, which always creates some interesting little side issues because we do have an upper division and now a graduate program. And so the graduate program does come separately under the graduate program authority of SUNY Central. And the upper division courses and curriculum all go through the chancellor's structure for SUNY Central. That is to say, we have a provost and we have an office that looks after the academic programs for all of the participants in SUNY. But we are a little unusual because here we are at community college doing all these other things. But from SUNY Central's point of view, we fit in the picture as a community college, and that is how we're funded, and that is how we legally are structured.
Have we considered applying for a different designation?
Yes, in fact, several different possibilities. There has been discussion of, years ago, at one point, of FIT perhaps becoming a part of CUNY, City University of New York. There has been discussion of FIT becoming a statutory campus under the State University of New York. There are a handful of campuses under SUNY
Central that are called statutory campuses, and they are campuses that are more independent than the state-operated campuses, who have some independent existence, including their own board of trustees, but who are within SUNY. And then we have this. There's ceramics. At Alfred, there's a school of ceramics at Alfred. There's the school, sub-school at Cornell. The College of Agricultural Studies, but it now has a new name at Cornell, is a statutory campus. So that there are a handful of these statutory campuses around the state. And then you have the regular so-called state ops that are operated as part of the SUNY network that includes the 4 major universities and then all the 4-year campuses. The state-operated schools do not have independent boards of trustees. The community colleges do, the statutory campuses do. State ops all come under the SUNY Central Board. Now, of course, we come under both, as do all the community colleges. Community college, you have your independent board, and then you also, on certain matters, come under the SUNY Central Board.
And what is our linkage to the Board of Education, New York City Board of Education?
They are our local sponsor. Our local sponsor, community colleges usually have as their local sponsor a county, or in some cases, more than one county that sponsors a community college within New York State. Our local sponsor is the New York City Board of Education.
Has that affected us in any way different than most community colleges in the state?
Yes, I would say it has, because we are in a situation in which the relationship between the state government, which is our supporter through SUNY, helps fund us, and our local sponsor, which is the Board of Education, puts us in the position of having our resources come from those 2 rather polar units within the state. Although I must tell you, my colleagues would say that that is not so different from their problems, which is to deal with the county legislation, because most of them are sponsored by the county legislature as their local sponsor, and they have that level of political structure to deal with. For us, it's the city through the Board of Ed and the state.
Could you talk a little about the international program, the graduate program and how it evolved?
All right, sure. The graduate program was put together by Bob Gutman, and in fact, when he first put the program together, he was named the Dean of Graduate Studies. And I think he had that title for 2 years before there were any faculty or any students. And we used to tease him because we said that must be the best deanship in the world. But he was the Dean of Graduate Studies for several years. It may not be exactly 2, that's in my own memory, but for several years before, in fact, the program was completely up and running and had faculty and students. It was set up with the idea of providing very specialized graduate studies in the area of museum studies and in the area of gallery and retail art administration. In museum studies, divided between the applied arts, or what some people would call the decorative arts, and the textile and costume program. In the case of the Gallery and Retail Art Administration, focused more on the business end of running a program, of running a gallery or retail art administration, and the museum studies, a division between the curatorial and the say, care for the actual exhibits that you're dealing with. The Museum Studies program has continued to focus on the textile and costume area because, of course, we have such a very fine collection here. So the idea that the textile and costume collections are a major resource for people studying museum studies in the care of a collection and the curatorial responsibilities for overseeing a collection. And, I'm sorry. All of these are MA programs. Our master's programs are all MA programs, which mean that while they are very specific and lead to preparation in applied areas, that is to say the museum studies or the gallery and retail art administration, they are liberal arts based. They are art history based because they are MAs.
Who is Bob Gutman?
Robert Gutman was the former dean of the Art and Design Division at FIT. And it was his dream, a dream shared with Marvin Feldman, that led to the development of a graduate program at FIT.
So it basically came from them, or was it initiated by, again, the industry meeting?
No, I think it's, well, I shouldn't say it, you should interview perhaps others, but my understanding is that the impetus to put together an MA program in museum studies and gallery and retail art administration really started because Dean Guttman, who was in many ways a Renaissance man, was convinced that there was a need for people with this specific education in museum studies and in gallery and retail art administration, that there was a need to prepare people in those ways, and that FIT could do it and could provide this type of education. I don't really think the industry went to Bob. I have a feeling that Dean Guttman had this idea and probably went out more to industry to say to the museums and the gallery and retail art people to talk about this more than the other way around. But that's just a supposition on my part.
Okay. When you think about talking about FIT, are there certain experiences that you would really like to have included in the archives?
Well, I suppose that the most remarkable people that I met here over the years were people like Kay Noyes, who was a professor in the English department in the early years that I was here, who was a moral light to all of us. Her famous statement at faculty association meetings was, "I am shocked," and kept a lot of us on the straight and narrow. Gladys Marcus, who I've mentioned already, and who certainly the liberal arts at FIT owe a great deal to what she did to establish the division, to establish the significance of the liberal arts in a career education, and in general to develop in a lot of us a sense of very great responsibility for the institution that we work for. So that she did not accept the idea that since we didn't have our own majors, we were kind of second cousins. She would never accept that, and we had to get out there and be very involved and make a real commitment. And I think she was a mentor to a lot of us.
We're winding down in terms of the interview. If there's something else you would like included?
Well, I think we've certainly covered a great deal of the history of FIT. I think perhaps a subject that we're all very much aware of is that we have in recent years been living through financial hard times because of the
financial situation in the state and in the city of New York, we have had to learn to do more with less. We have had to learn to be smarter in the way we use our resources. We've had to learn to be more careful in the way that we use them. And I think that despite the fact that many people have grown weary of it, and it has been a long time, this is the 5th year in a row that I have had to tighten budgets. And when you've had to do that for 5 years running, you feel like you've tightened every place there is to tighten. And yet, I think what we've really learned is that there's a great deal that can be done with ingenuity and creativity and with going out to industry and asking for help in appropriate ways. And I hope that when, in fact, we do have resources available, as we do from time to time in special initiatives that are that come from SUNY Central or that come from the federal government or other opportunities, that we are learning to perhaps be very, very cautious and careful in how we use our resources so that we will get the very best education we can for our students out of what we have. And so I suppose I look on it as an uncomfortable experience that we've had to go through, and yet a positive one that I think we've gone through and will continue to go through and meet our financial responsibilities, and at the same time try to provide the best we can within those limited resources. So that I think it would be wonderful to be an administrator at a time when there were resources coming in and you could say yes to a lot of people instead of having to say no to a lot of people. But I think that the contributions have been wonderful. The faculty is marvelous. They come forward with wonderful ideas, and when they know there really is very little money, they often come forward with ways of making it possible, either by going to industry sponsors they know, or by finding some way to apply for a grant, or by simply coming up with a way of doing something on a shoestring if some of us can go out and find the shoestring for them. And so I really think that FIT has very creative, very formidable faculty that are very, very hardworking, and I think that's really what makes the institution what it is. Students are the lifeblood of a university, of a college, but I think that the faculty is what holds it together, because that's really where the education is happening, is in the classroom. And I'm very proud of the faculty at FIT. I just think they have done a marvelous job over the years. It hasn't always been easy, but I think that we have had a wonderful opportunity over the years to deal with a highly professional faculty, and I think they deserve kudos.
Do you have some notion of what the future is going to be like at FIT in terms of developing new programs, new themes that are?
Well, we have a lot of new programs in the works. That goes along with having several new deans, I'm sure, but we had a number that went in to planning last year. We currently have letters of intent in Albany for a series of the marketing options to be considered as independent programs, and we are waiting to hear from Albany about that. That would allow, for example, in the cosmetics area, cosmetics, fragrances, and toiletries, to use its full name, for there to be more of a focus on product development. It would allow for each of the options to perhaps more clearly provide the professional part of the education for those students. We have several new certificate programs in the works. One in leather is being worked on in the Art and Design Division. There are developments afoot in the Art and Design Division that will probably lead to a new upper division BFA in, I'm going to call it computer graphics, but I don't necessarily mean that that's how it will be registered. They are so far there isn't even a letter of intent on file yet, but it's in the process, and I expect within the year we'll have a letter of intent that will be some variation on computer-aided design, computer graphics, that would be at the BFA level. I believe that there will eventually be an upper division program in photography, and as it has become a very highly technical area, I believe eventually we will have an upper division program there. I know that Dean Carlin is interested in developing possibility of an upper division program eventually, a new upper division program in fine arts area. There has been talk of the possibility of a program that focused on furniture design, which may in fact be a bachelor's level program or may be a master's program. There are several programs under development or consideration at the master's level that are specific programs such as facilities, design and management, the possibility of the history of style program, the possibility of some type of a perhaps MPS, Masters of Professional Studies, program in textile management, and perhaps at some future date, fashion management. I think those are some of the programs that are currently moving along, and I expect there will be many others because we do have very vigorous deans in all four of the academic divisions who are very eager to help their faculty go forward with new programs. And so we are already getting discussions, as I just mentioned, between Lois Ambash in the liberal arts division and Bruce Chambers in the graduate studies division about the possibility of some kind of an MA in the history of style, which might be a joint venture between some of the art historians in liberal arts and the faculty in graduate studies. So I think that we will see some interdivisional programs develop, and some of them possibly between the graduate and the undergraduate level, so that we might come out with some programs that combine the upper two years of the lower division with a year or two of graduate study into, instead of 2 years for the upper division and then 2 years in graduate studies, coursework, and then a thesis, might combine that into a smaller package.
Would you like to add anything more? We're winding down in the interview.
I've thoroughly enjoyed my years at FIT, and as I'm sure everyone does, look forward to some very exciting years to come. I think it's a fascinating place to be. When I started here as an instructor in economics, I certainly never knew that I'd end up sitting where I am now, but I can tell you as a closing note, the best job at FIT is to be a member of the teaching faculty. The classroom is the most rewarding place to be. And administration is very interesting. I enjoy the challenge. I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I don't mean to say that. But there is just something so rewarding about being in a classroom at FIT. I just think that's a wonderful part of all of our jobs, yours and mine both. You're very welcome.